But one of the things I'm going to say about 1 Corinthians 15 is that Paul would completely discredit himself by writing to that church and saying these people existed if they didn't exist. 500 people is a lot of people. And he says some of them are still alive. So Paul, if he were to say some of them are still alive and you can ask them, if that wasn't the case, people would be going, Paul, what are you talking about?
Frank Turek's argument sounds persuasive to many believers. Paul says Jesus appeared to more than 500 people. Turek's point is simple. Paul would not have written that unless it were true. What does Paul actually write in 1 Corinthians? For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, he appeared to me also. Notice what Paul gives us. One sentence about the more than 500. No names, no location, no description of what happened, no explanation of how he learned this, just the claim. Notice something else. Turek speaks as though the Corinthians could simply fact-check Paul. But how? Paul doesn't tell them who these 500 people were. He doesn't say where this appearance happened. He doesn't say when it happened. He doesn't explain how he himself learnt about it. He simply says that most of them were still alive. Could someone have investigated this? Perhaps. But the letter itself gives the Corinthians almost nothing to investigate. Turek's argument assumes that Paul's audience could have verified the claim or even wanted to. Knowing about the kinds of things people nowadays believe based on mere hearsay, I find that hard to believe. Now, before going any further, I want to grant Turek something. I do not think Paul was lying. I think Paul sincerely believed his tradition. But that raises another historical question. How could a sincere religious community come to believe that their deceased Messiah had appeared to hundreds of people? I think we can learn something by looking at a modern example. In 1994, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, died. Many of his followers believed he was the Messiah, and for some, that belief didn't end with his death. Reports began circulating that people were still seeing him. Even today, some believers maintain rituals that emphasize the Rebbe's continuing presence. At gatherings, for example, they leave a clear path through the crowd as though the Rebbe is about to enter the synagogue. A follower will hand out cakes as if he were the Rebbe. They study his writings in synagogue in front of his empty desk. The expectation that the Rebbe is still present isn't just an abstract belief. It's woven into communal life. Just as the earliest Christians gathered around rituals like the breaking of bread in remembrance of Jesus, these rituals keep the Rebbe's presence vivid for the community. Now, consider one story published on a Messianist Chabad website. A woman named Chava Cohen was attending a family celebration. According to her account, she suddenly thought she saw the Rebbe standing in the kitchen. Her first reaction wasn't, the Rebbe has appeared, it was, I must have imagined it. So she kept the experience to herself. A little later, another woman, part of the same family, approached her without knowing what Chava had experienced. She said she had also seen the Rebbe. Chava asked where. The woman described walking from the sink to the fridge and back again, and pointed to the exact same place where Chava believed she had seen him. Now, I'm not presenting this as evidence that the Rebbe appeared, and I can't verify this story. What interests me is the process it describes. Before the conversation, there are two separate experiences. Each woman doubts herself. Each is prepared to dismiss what happened, but after talking, their confidence changes. What had been, I think I imagined something, becomes we both saw the Rebbe. And once that interpretation is repeated, it's naturally remembered as one shared appearance, especially if the story then gets retold, as has been done here on the Chabad website. Now consider another example. Years after the Rebbe's death, a video recorded inside the synagogue at 770 Eastern Parkway, the headquarters of the Chabad-Lubavitch community, that video began circulating online. So, before anyone tells you what you're supposed to see, just watch it. Some people see absolutely nothing unusual. Some think they see an elderly man moving through the crowd. Others become convinced they've seen the Rebbe. The footage itself is ambiguous. But now imagine you're actually there. The congregation has just finished singing fervently. A path has been left open for the Rebbe to enter. Everyone's attention and emotions have been focused on this one man, who they believe to be the Messiah. You're surrounded by people who believe he is still present. Someone quietly says, "I think I just saw the Rebbe." Another asks, "When?" "Just after we finished singing." Someone else replies, "That's interesting. I didn't see anyone, but I remember feeling his presence very strongly right then." Another person says, "I only caught a flash of light. I wasn't sure if it was from the lamps or it was in the corner of my eye, right about where you were seeing the Rebbe, I think." Notice what's happening. These aren't necessarily the same experiences. One person reports seeing someone. Another describes an overwhelming sense of presence. Someone else isn't sure what they saw. But as they compare and tell and retell their experiences, those different experiences begin to fit together. The visual impression, the feeling of presence, the uncertainty. Gradually, they become interpreted as different parts of the same event. Eventually, people are no longer talking about separate experiences. They're talking about the Rebbe appearing. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not saying that's what happened in this synagogue. I don't know. I'm describing a perfectly ordinary human process. Communities don't just share experiences. They also share interpretations, and over time, those interpretations become traditions. Now go back to Paul. Paul doesn't tell us what happened among the 500. He doesn't tell us whether every individual had exactly the same experience. He doesn't tell us whether some people initially doubted what they'd seen. He doesn't tell us what conversations took place afterward. He doesn't tell us whether different kinds of experiences gradually came to be understood as one shared appearance. He simply reports the settled tradition. He appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters at one time. Turek presents this as though there are only two possibilities. Either Jesus literally appeared to more than 500 people, or skeptics have to explain how 500 people all experienced exactly the same hallucination. But the Chabad-Lubavitch examples suggest another possibility. Not fraud, not conspiracy, not 500 identical hallucinations, something much more ordinary. People sincerely trying to understand experiences together. Individual experiences become shared interpretations. Shared interpretations become shared stories. And shared stories can become traditions about group appearances. Does that prove that's what happened after Jesus' death? No, it doesn't. Modern Chabad cannot tell us what happened in first century Judea. But it does demonstrate something important. Sincere religious communities can develop traditions about post-death appearances. Those traditions can emerge naturally through conversation, retelling, comparison, shared interpretation, which means Paul's statement is not 500 independent eyewitness testimonies. It's one man's report of a tradition that already existed. And notice how different that is from the way this argument is often presented. We don't have over 500 testimonies. We don't know who the more than 500 were. We can't compare their accounts. We can't ask what each person experienced. We have one author reporting what he says an early community believed. That's some sort of historical evidence, but it's a very different kind of evidence from having 500 independently examinable eyewitness accounts. I think Paul believed that tradition. The historical question isn't whether Paul was sincere. The historical question is how sincere people came to believe it in the first place. And that's why I do not think the 500 witnesses argument settles the debate. It starts one.